So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our session today on OneHE mindsets. It's great to see so many of you here and so many more people who have registered for the session. We have a very diverse and international audience today. I know that because we had more than 55 registrations and from different countries. And I see that we have more people joining the session just now. Dr. Dina Marzuku, I'm a Teaching Excellence Fellow at Robert Gordon University and founder of the Mindsets Group that operates via the global OneHE network. And before we start this session, I'd like to offer a short introduction to the effort we're making here, because this is an open community. And we have really one vision, which is to bring together educators, librarians, learning and teaching support professionals, policymakers, students, and anyone really who is interested in exploring information literacy, digital literacy, and media literacy issues. But from the point of students' transitions into and out of higher education, and also how we can empower academics to develop those skills and to continue developing those skills. So we're very passionate about these themes. You can see the email to join us here, and we currently have a very vibrant community with more than 300, I believe, members so far. And with that really short introduction to our community, I just wanted to introduce you to the topic we have today, a fascinating topic on 3D virtual worlds for professional development and lifelong learning. We all know how these kinds of immersive environments have now become even more important than ever in learning with the pandemic restrictions we have experienced. And it's really, though, important to say that these types of environments have existed for a long time. And many researchers, academics, and other people are using them for different purposes, and not only for learning, but also for entertaining, for playing. And as Sheila has provided in her introduction, for therapy and for many other purposes. So today we have the pleasure to have with us a special guest, which I believe, I would say, and I'm really, really confident about that, with an incredible amount of experience in 3D virtual worlds and how they can be used in education, professional development, and lifelong learning. I'd like to welcome Sheila Weber, who is a senior lecturer in the Information School at University of Sheffield in the UK. Sheila leads the MA program in Library and Information Services Management. Actually, it's a suite of programs. Sheila is the head of the Libraries and Information Society Research Group and has been awarded a number of accolades, such as the University of Sheffield Senate Award for Sustained Excellence in Teaching and the UK E-Information Group Jason Faraday Award. Sheila is an honorary fellow of the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals and has been engaging professionally in virtual worlds since 2007. So I'm sure that many of you would like to be familiar with Sheila's work, and some of you may already be familiar with Sheila's blog, actually, the Information Literacy blog, which I personally use quite a lot, and I get a lot of interesting updates around the world of information literacy. So in this talk, Sheila will give an introduction to ways in which virtual worlds are used in education, but beyond that as well, for professional and for personal development. She talked about the benefits and some of the issues that you may encounter in virtual worlds. We'll talk about opportunities for professional development. And it's important to mention that Sheila is a leader of the Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable. And this is an international educators discussion group, which these members of the group actually are meeting every week in a 3D virtual world called Second Life. And they're doing this since 2008, which is really fantastic and impressive. And also I should mention that Sheila is a founder member of the Virtual Worlds Education Consortium, so we'll learn more about this. The session will follow the format of a presentation, followed by a demonstration, but we would like to invite you to be a participant audience, as we normally do in these sessions, and engage in conversation by using the chat area. You can do that during the presentation as you are doing now. So you can also use the social media account to post any comments about the session today. Some of you may wish to raise your hand and ask a question with your microphone towards the later part of the session, so we will encourage you to do that. But I would like to ask you to keep your microphone switched off for now, so in order to avoid any background noises. So I think now we're ready to begin. So over to you, Sheila.
Thank you very much. So as you might have guessed on the screen, there's me in the physical world and me in the virtual world. I identify with my avatar. In Second Life, I'm called Sheila Yoshikawa. This was a kind of convention that you had to choose your name when you went into Second Life when I joined in 2007. But actually, I've quite enjoyed choosing my own name. There was the one I was the family name I was born with. There was the family name I acquired when I married my husband about 40 years ago, which I'm fine with. I quite like Weber as a name, but it was quite nice to choose my own family name when I joined Second Life. So, and as you might have seen, Sheila Yoshikawa also in Twitter at Sheila Yoshikawa. So I'm going to, I'll just mention the background I've chosen. I'm moving to a side. The background I've chosen for Zoom is actually taken in a coffee shop that I've created in Books and Coffee Shop I've created in Second Life. That's actually me browsing the shelves, wearing the same outfit as I am in that, what I would call photo of me in Second Life. So I'm going to share my screen now. And I'll go to my first slide. I'm going to perhaps now finding the different bits that you can do. I'll type in now. This is, hopefully that'll come up. I've put this already on SlideShare, and also the references to this are in a Google Doc. There's references, but also the various web addresses you'll see, and some additional links to videos and things like that. And I'll probably add a few more links to that Google Doc. So I'll be explaining later on that what you see on this title screen is actually me last Thursday presenting a draft of this presentation at the Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, because I thought it wasn't actually an illustration of how professional development works in Second Life. So done that. So here I'm going to be focusing more on what could virtual worlds be good for, rather than a step-by-step practical how do you do it. Although if you look at some of the links I put in the document, you'll get some information from that. It's not going to be theoretical really, it's more talking from my experience and also drawing on other people's experience in particular, although there are a few references. So I'm going to start by defining virtual worlds and virtual reality. I'm going to go on to identify some perceived strengths and weaknesses of virtual worlds, and then give perspectives on continuing professional development, actually drawing on some research that one of my PhD students did about conceptions of CPD and relating it to virtual worlds and my own professional practice, and talk about lifelong learning. Then, as Dina's already said, I'm going to be aiming to give a demonstration, a kind of whistle-stop tour of some places in Second Life, in case that worked when I tested it out last week, but in case it for some reason doesn't work, I've also put some images on screenshots on slides in this presentation. So I'll go through those if there's some sort of problem. So I wanted to ask whether any of you have used virtual worlds or virtual reality. I think just scanning through, it looked like a few of you might have done. If you could be typing that into the text chat, I'll go ahead for a couple of slides and then look back at the text chat to see what people have said. So it'd be interesting to know whether any, and if you have, which worlds or applications you've been using. So I'm going to start by defining virtual worlds and actually use a definition from 2009. That virtual worlds are persistent, so they're there even when you're not. Multiple people can share the same space at the same moment, embodied as a 3D avatar. That avatars can interact with objects and each other in the virtual world, and these interactions are in real time. And there are similarities to the physical world, for example, that you can look at it and see similarities with the physical world geography. There are some physics shared with that are emulated or simulated from the physical world. Appearances of things like trees and grass and indeed people and animals. And I've given an example here that kind of illustrates that. So this is a meeting of the Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable that I lead. I've been leading it for a couple of years. I've been gradually, to begin with, I was just someone that attended, and then I got involved in organizing. It's a bit like any professional association. You can, as soon as you indicate you're willing to do something, gradually you get sucked in, and you might end up actually leading it. And so each of these is people. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people there all together. So there we are. This landscape, which is the headquarters, it's where we have our discussion table for Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable. It's there even when I'm not, or even when there's no one there, it's there. There's a number of us there as avatars, and we're interacting with an object. In fact, what's happening here is that we were discussing the latest Horizon report, which is now published by EduCause. It used to be published by the New Media Consortium, which identifies trends. It's kind of big Delphi study for educators, mainly North American, but they've made it increasingly international. And there were a series of questions which they'd asked themselves when deciding what the big tech trends were. And after a bit of a presentation discussion about the main kind of conclusions of the latest Horizon report, which was published a couple of months ago, we use this thing which is called an opinionator, where you have the boxes around the edge and you can label them. They're labeled with a Likert scale at the moment. And when people stand on them, it automatically forms a pie chart. So it's like an instant pie chart. So the reason why the green one is smallest is there's only 2 people standing there, whereas the red option, which was 5, which is that people think there's an amazing amount of potential for virtual worlds to have a positive and significant impact on learning outcomes. So this is a tool I use with my students. It's actually quite an old tool that's been around for well over 10 years, but it's also really easy, simple tool to use. And the great thing is once you've got into your kind of boxes, you can then start asking people, well, why have you chosen? Why do you think it's got an amazing potential? So it's good for instant showing of what people's opinions are. And also sometimes when people actually change their opinion, they're kind of literally walking from one box to another. And also it's really good for stimulating discussion amongst educators or students. But and the similarities, you can see that most of us look like people. There's just Stranger there, Stranger Nightfire, who's presenting as a kind of small creature, small teddy bear. But there's grass and trees and things like that. And I thought I'd just mention, in terms of the variety of people there, there was a professor from the Open University in the UK, a school librarian from the USA, a retired college professor who's in his 80s, but he's still very active and innovative in virtual worlds. He's been in a retirement home for years, but he's really active virtually. There were a couple of people owning, co-founding companies that develop learning solutions, particularly virtual worlds ones. A STEM education consultant who's based in Alaska, a reference librarian from a law school in the USA, someone who's an ethnographer and an exhibition curator, she's based in the USA, and an academic librarian in Puerto Rico. Of those, I've met 2 of them in the physical world, the professor from the OU and in fact the academic librarian from Puerto Rico when the IFLA conference was in Puerto Rico. But others of them I would feel I know them because I've known them for years and years and years, and we go to kind of similar meetings. So in terms of Virtual Worlds, and I'll just say there's one of the, I'm just, one of the notices that comes up to admit people in the waiting room just put itself over my heading, and I suddenly couldn't remember what the heading was. Virtual Worlds Experience and Research. So I just wanted to highlight that there's been a huge amount of educational research about virtual worlds. In particular, there was a big cluster around 2008 and 2012, when there was a lot of hype about Second Life in particular. And I and other people who are been around virtual worlds for a long time get rather frustrated when research comes out, as it has been doing over the last year or two, which totally ignores everything that has already happened in virtual worlds when they're researching virtual reality, because there's a huge amount of overlap in terms of the potential, the barriers, the experience. So I think if you're in this area and you're not aware of this, if you're working in virtual reality and you're not aware of this virtual worlds research, it's really interesting to tap into. And in terms of virtual worlds as opposed to virtual realities, there are educators leaving, but also joining. It's kind of, it's not particularly a declining area. And so, as I've said, a virtual world has been defined in the way I already said: persistent, shared, there are avatars, real-time interactions, similarities to the physical world. As regards defining these other terms, with some of them, there's a lot of fuzziness, particularly the extended reality one, I would say. Virtual reality tends to mean digitally created environments viewed from inside a virtual reality headset, giving a sense of perspective and scale, and sometimes enhanced by haptic technology so that you can feel like you're touching things, or other non-visual technology. But it is not part of the definition that it's persistent or shared, because you have individual, quite a lot of VR experiences are individual rather than you're sharing them real time in the world with other people. Augmented reality normally means that you're combining physical and virtual world, usually that you're having some kind of virtual overlay. So for example, in a museum, if it was augmented reality, the headings might pop up as you looked at different exhibits, which would lead you to more information popping up about that particular exhibit. And an example also is kind of with games, where you might go into a physical location and virtual things pop up. So you're getting this blend of the physical and the virtual. And extended reality, as I said, is the one that sometimes gets used in the same way as augmented reality, but it seems increasingly it's a sort of umbrella term for any mixture of the virtual and physical. And some people have defined it broadly as extending from the purely physical to the purely virtual. But for me, that is actually reality. I don't think it's extended reality. I think that's people's reality nowadays, is that it's a combination of the virtual and the physical. That's the way people are living, particularly after the pandemic. I'm just going to scroll back now through the chat to see. So someone said Assumpta said she's Second Life a few years ago. And also Dina, Alan McClellan has used Second Life. Had to play with Mozilla Hubs. So, and Opensim from one person for their PhD. So that's useful for me to know as I go on. It would be interesting to know also why people stopped using virtual worlds. That's also something that'd be interesting if you wouldn't mind sharing in the chat. So it might be for some of these reasons. So some commonly mentioned disadvantages of virtual worlds are that many of them require specialist browsers. So you can't just use Chrome and Firefox, although there are ones now where you can just use an ordinary browser to go in. That ideally for many virtual worlds, you need a gaming specification laptop. So I'm using something called the Predator, the Acer Predator, which is a gaming laptop because it had a very high spec graphics card with a dedicated memory and a good fan to cool it down when there's lots of kind of processing going on. Also, you need excellent broadband again to get kind of the top specification, although it's possible if you create very low graphics environments, which you can do because you have control over that in a virtual world, it would be more accessible to a wider range of people. Also, the learning curve to learn how to be in a virtual world and get the most out of it. I never really found that a bother because I just enjoyed learning about it. I find it fascinating from the start, and it's similar to, I think, with some of the other people who've stayed in there. But some people find this, feel that they ought to be able to just kind of plug and play. And although it is possible as an educator to get around that a bit by having ready-made avatars and to choreograph what you want them to do very carefully so they don't have to learn to do that very much, to get the most out of it, you probably do need to spend a bit of time. No ready-made plot line, which I personally think is great. There's so much that you can do, although many virtual worlds also have role play areas which do have more of a plot line. But for the people who like to see goals and quests, which is quite a lot of gamers, I mean, there's a huge range. One area that I'm interested in is actually information behavior in computer gaming. I've had a lot of students doing research in that area. And there's a lot of research about motivation to gaming, and there are very wide ranges, but some of them are, a number of them are tied in with achievement and being competitive. And from that point of view, you might land in a virtual world and think, well, what am I supposed to do next? Where's the goal? Where's the quest? It does cost money to rent land, virtual land, in which to create your customized environments, for example, for learners or just for yourself. Although it varies depending on which kind of virtual world it is as to whether that's a large amount or not. Although for most of the virtual worlds, you can just go in for free and wander around if you're not bothered about having an area that you can customize. And some administrators, teachers, and particularly importantly, learners see virtual worlds as childish, frivolous, or dangerous, equating it with gaming. I mean, I think that also ties into the fact that I think gaming gets demonized. As I said, I'm interested in this as a kind of research area, and there is rather a domination of literature about the evils of gaming, kind of addiction to gaming, and how it impacts on people's health badly, rather than some other aspects of gaming. So if you've got any opinions about whether any of those deterred you, I saw that lack of computer, lack of appropriate computer, never very comfortable interacting with other avatars, more into programming from Alan. And one of the interesting things is also, and there's been a bit of research by an ethnographer who's an American professor. He's done a few really interesting studies, but recently he's done one into why people used virtual worlds or what their feelings were about using virtual worlds during the pandemic. And in fact, one reason for doing it was to be alone, that people were in these crowded houses shut in with other people, and they felt by going into the virtual world they could actually be by themselves, which I thought was quite interesting. Just having another look. So Kirsten asks, are virtual worlds moderated? There are terms and conditions, so you can, yes, about not abusing other people, not invading their privacy and things. And then it depends a bit. So it depends on whether it's an open virtual world like Second Life, which anyone can join, or if it's a virtual world that's been set up by an educational institution, in which case it might be quite tightly policed. Only certain people might get in there. And in fact, in Second Life, for example, there's an adult region where people have sex, virtual sex and so forth, and the general region where there's guidelines about what you're allowed to actually kind of publicly display or publicly do as an avatar. So there is moderation, etc. Yes. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm referencing here a video which was presented at the last Virtual Worlds Education Best Practices in Education Conference, which happens every year, mostly in Second Life, but also in other virtual worlds, where someone who works at Hewlett-Packard and also teaches at an American university gave this presentation on 14 reasons why virtual worlds are still better than social VR worlds. And just taking a look at the time, I won't go through all of these, but these are factors I think it's an interesting recording as she goes through these one by one, but they're the elements that she's identified as important if you are trying to decide, is this suitable for me doing my educational practice? Things like the control over over the learning context, the accessibility and usability of the environment, obviously things like the cost and the learning tools available, and whether people can collaborate. So I think these are useful headings to think about if you are considering. So I'd recommend looking at her video. Let's have another quick look at the chat. Some advantages that I in particular see about virtual worlds are the social co-presence. And again, during the pandemic, particularly where there were more people in virtual worlds, and I experienced that in Second Life, people were talking about how it was nice to be with people, that it somehow felt more social and more real than a Zoom call, in that you felt like you were together in the environment, rather than separated on a screen. Not everyone feels that wholly, but certainly some people do feel that there's a feeling of really being together, which they don't feel so much if they're just disembodied kind of heads on a screen. The fact that you don't need great technical skills, because I'm not a programmer, I feel comfortable in using technology, but I haven't got any kind of real hardcore technical skills, because there's a huge amount of content, like the opinionator that I was showing a few slides ago. This thing, I bought it for about £1, and then I used it for years and years. And so trees, but also whiteboards that you can use and all sorts of other things you can buy for really small amounts of money, and create your own environment, rather than having to pay someone to create a custom environment, which is happening with quite a lot of the virtual reality programs. You're free to present your avatar as you want. A lot of people do want to present as human beings, but some present as books or trees, or dragons. And again, this is something that does get discussed, and certainly I feel that it helps to avoid stigma, such as ageism, that which I have noticed more as I got older, and I've got more visibly older, that people do treat you differently. And similarly, people with disability, there's a strong disability movement within Second Life, and I'm going to mention that briefly later on. And also it may be to do with ethnicity. So some people very much want to present a particular ethnicity or age, or indeed a disability, because they feel it's something they want to present in all the environments. Other people want to be freed up from that and want to use their imagination. I think that's a big discussion topic, but certainly that's how I've experienced it. I felt this was a very supportive educational community. And once you get a few educational contacts and start going to educational meetings, it's somewhere where I feel I can kind of talk about my mistakes and get advice. You can use text chat and messaging and voice. And I mention this because some people prefer text chat. Certainly when I was using it more with students, international students, a lot of them quite liked that, who didn't have English as their first language, because they could think about it and then type in. It might have some typos or grammatical errors, but it was more likely they'd get understood than sometimes when they were speaking. Or if people are shy, they're sometimes willing to type into text chat. Also, there are people with hearing disabilities. One of my co-organizers with the Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable has a hearing disability. And so some meetings are text chat only. Personally, I find it visually stimulating and also relaxing, so wandering in a wood or watching the waves or something like that. And it's a low stakes way of learning about or experiencing high stakes situations. So it's been found very useful in areas like health, medicine, nursing, to have simulations, crisis management of different kinds, floods, fires, chemical experiments and so forth. And as I mentioned, I tried this out. So these are a lot of the same people who were on the Opinionator. Again, from, I think they're all either from the UK or the USA. Most of them people I wouldn't have met otherwise. For example, the woman in the blue shirt, Marley, is in her 80s and she's just an amazing history. She was in the 60s singing kind of culture songs. She does symbolic modeling, behavior therapy still. She's engaged with all kinds of communities. She writes music, she does art. She's based in the, she's not someone I never would have come across. And certainly she's an example of someone who enriches my life through meeting her in the virtual world. But anyway, you'll see that it has a different title slide here, where because I knew it was going to be kind of people I knew, educators I knew, I put me chasing my tail to finish the presentation on the title slide to indicate that it was kind of a draft. But that, I suppose I put this in to illustrate how this was useful for my professional development, because this presentation is better because of the input of people there. And I did ask them for some quotations. So Val is, she's retired now, but she's still very active. She recently published a book about meta-literacy. She's Val Hill in the physical world. She says, everyone lives in virtual worlds now on our digital devices and platforms, whether or not one has an avatar. The biggest advantage of virtual world like Second Life is the sense of presence, actually being together, not just sending your voice out into the internet through social media or web platforms. Pai, who's the academic librarian from Puerto Rico, except for a few colleagues, I found the professional conversation more rewarding here. Wisdom Seeker, who is Lynn Barrett in the physical world, she runs Inspiration Island, which has a whole range of experiences. I've met people here I've never met in any other way. And Val again, most of the VR headset experience I've ever had are disposable, meaning I see a beautiful simulation, then pop, I don't need to return. In virtual worlds, you'd be a persistent environments through collaboration and return again and again. And finally, Andy, who teaches chemical process engineering. And there's a shot, or I think I've put it next on here. He has created a virtual area for students. I find virtual reality effective for teaching scenarios that either infrequently encountered or are hazardous. Starting up an industrial furnace is an example. They're started infrequently, maybe less than once a year. So new operators may not get an opportunity to observe startup with experienced individuals before they're called to start it. The equipment can also be hazardous if started improperly. Virtual reality provides an opportunity to practice authentic scenarios. So operators are practiced and ready to perform activities right the first time. So thanks to people who were at that meeting. And this was a visit we had to this installation where you kind of click things and it goes through, it simulates the actual process of starting up the furnace. And he's also built some other parts to do with process plant technology. So some examples of 3D virtual worlds. The one I'm talking most about is Second Life. It started in 2003. It's free to sign up for an avatar. Most things within Second Life are created by Second Life residents, and the owners make money from the land rental and the percentage of the cash transactions. And every year there are millions of US dollars annually traded inside Second Life, people buying virtual things. There's a huge number of places to explore, recreational and educational, artistic, and as I said, catering for other interests as well on the adult continent. There's a lot of big charity events, and I just illustrate one of those later on, and very strong communities, as you can imagine, having been around for that time, including on disability and in education. Anyone can create and script objects, and there's also loads and loads of objects to buy and adapt, and sometimes free to exchange with other people. So other examples are Opensim, which was an open source application originally based on Second Life, I think, which is not open source. And it's been developed so that people can install it on their own computers. And it's also been used by third parties such as Avacon and Kitely to create worlds where at lower cost than, for example, Second Life, you can buy areas that you can then customize in a similar way to Second Life. I also thought I'd mention 3D web worlds because that's a world you can go in through a browser, and it's free to sign up. And these links are all in the Google Doc. And I thought I had to mention Minecraft because I would put this in the same category. It's a sandbox world. It stays there when you're not. You can do, there are quests within, depending on which edition you bought, because obviously there's lots of different editions available now. And it's positioned as a game, but I would say it counts also as a world because you can use it to be creative and to create your own story in a similar kind of way. And people in Minecraft can create. So I think it meets the conditions I mentioned earlier. So just to say a little bit about continuing professional development. Also I know in the USA, I think it's more often known as continuing professional education. And this is a presentation at the Virtual Worlds Best Practice in Education Conference. It's actually something I was leading. We had our session of Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable discussion as part of the program in this conference. And the whole thing has got a kind of space theme. So this auditorium is a kind of, it's like a space dump on a planet somewhere, which I customized with those posters about the things that we were going to be discussing. So I'm going to frame this with the findings. I thought I'm an academic. I want to have some academic stuff here. And so from one of my PhD students, Dr. Eva Hornung, she identified 5 perspectives on continuing professional development using phenomenography, where you interview people and you're trying to find out what are the different ways they're thinking about this particular phenomenon. In this case, it was continuing professional development. And she was focusing on people who worked alone in the library, where they were the only librarian in the organization. But talking to people, I think some of these categories can be applied elsewhere. And I'm going to do that when I'm talking about virtual worlds. So she identified things where you were very focused on the service. You thought, what skills do I need to do this job that I've got to do for the service, upskilling? People who are very focused on their professional identity. In this case, it's library professionals. And they want to develop well as a professional. Others who had a more specific identity to do with, in this case, the one-person library. People who like to do things better. They were still quite skilled focused, but very personal rather than the organization. And then people who are very focused on just learning, lifelong learning. They love to learn. And my perception, this is not based on academic research, is that people in virtual worlds the people I've met seem to particularly take a professional orientation where they're in virtual worlds because they want to develop as a professional educator, and they see that as a good way of doing it. And then they want to be very good educators in virtual worlds and elsewhere. A personal orientation of wanting to improve their skills because they feel they like to be well skilled, and so they might be developing different parts of their skill set. And also I've met a lot of people in virtual worlds who have a lifelong learning orientation. They just love to learn through life. They're learning all the time. They want to develop as human beings, and they found virtual worlds as one way of doing that, of stimulating their creativity perhaps. So I haven't met quite so many of the people who are more extrinsically motivated to develop and learn. And I personally, so again, I don't know if there's if anyone's got any comments or questions about that, then do again type them into chat. So I personally find it enjoyable and reviving to engage with people who've got an orientation like that, because I feel it encouraged, because I think I've got a lifelong learning orientation. I like learning things, although also elements of the others as well. Sometimes I need to learn something for my organization. And it's nice when what I need to learn for my organization coincides with my own desire to learn. And certainly I have felt it's engaging in virtual worlds has given me other skills, and I'll be saying that in a moment. So my own professional experience is that and I'll go through this quite quickly, that I taught initially for several years running, I think about 6 years. I taught first year undergraduates and master's students in Second Life. And this diagram is actually taken from a presentation I gave in 2011. That's, if you scroll back far enough on SlideShare, you'll find it there, where the end point was that they had to get a transcript of an interview they carried out virtually in Second Life about information behavior, because it was an information literacy module also covering information behavior. And building up to that, I inducted them into Second Life. We did it in the lab in Sheffield, and they had to do a problem-based activity, and also general kind of finding things and learning how to walk and talk and so forth. And then I paired them up with interviewees who were educators and other people active in Second Life. They had to carry out the interview and then they had to analyze it. And it involved quite a lot of different kinds of communication, face-to-face, Second Life, using email and instant messaging to contact the interviewees. So they were actually developing their digital skills as well as their communication and professional skills, because they had to present themselves professionally as interviewers. And that was actually another part of the assignment. They had to reflect on their performance as an interviewer as part of the assignment they did for this class. So I felt it fitted very well. They were information management students. I felt it fitted well with the aim of the class. Also, I've been a member and in some cases taken leadership in professional groups within Virtual Worlds, which is like my physical world activity, getting involved in things like CILIP and so forth. And I've listed some of them here. Some of them were very instrumental in helping me develop and grow, particularly the Educators Co-op, I would say, which was quite a small group of educators. And we had, we worked on projects together to develop our pedagogy, really. It was a really warm, supportive group, which sadly ended when one of the leaders died of cancer, and her co-owner was also graduating from his PhD at the same time. But while it was going, it was really a good experience. But there are these which are still going. The newest is the Virtual Worlds Education Consortium, which is acting to try and bring together the various organizations that exist in virtual worlds to do with educators, to get a bit more cross-fertilization. Some of us belong to several of these groups, but some we feel that we could be communicating and sharing and consolidating a bit more than we are at the moment. And I put at the bottom, I think it's the same with all the professional involvement I've had, that you get out what you put into it. Also, I've been involved in attending, presenting and organising conferences and events, a lot of individual events to do with information literacy and information behaviour, a little bit of organisation in educational events. And these are some of the bigger events that happen regularly. And again, there's links in the Google Doc if you want to have a look at those. And I think this has developed my skills and confidence in terms of planning for the unexpected, because having dealt with things going wrong in Second Life, kind of something like Blackboard seemed a real doddle. And so I've learned the importance of planning ahead, so that if something, you can actually be quite creative because you've got the backup plan, and dealing with things calmly, the importance of telling people what's going on and so forth, just the experience of that. And also handling multiple channels of communication, which I've done when I'm moderating sessions in Second Life, where I'm dealing with a whole range of input and trying to make sense of that. And using different applications. I've used video. I've gained more skills to do with video recording, with photo editing and things like that, which are a nice spin-off. Also, in terms of presenting in different modes and getting feedback from varied audiences, I've said I'm meeting people I wouldn't have otherwise. So I'm not just in a kind of an echo chamber of other people interested, for example, in information literacy, and trying out new ideas, feeling I'm more creative. So my feeling is that I have developed a more creative approach to teaching and learning, perhaps even life. And that brings me to lifelong learning, where I would mention that the age profile for Second Life, I don't have exact details, but there's a lot of people over 60, never mind kind of over 30. I think attracting people who have an idea of what they want to do. So there might be a perception that this would be particularly attractive to young people, and there certainly are younger people in there as well. But there certainly is a lot of room and a lot of input from people from older age groups, which I find enriches it personally. And I just mentioned as one of the kind of activities that people are, for example, involved in volunteering for charities. This is an example of an annual event. In fact, there wasn't one last year because of the pandemic, but for a number of years beforehand, there's something called Hair Fair, where there are people who specialize in making virtual hair and selling this virtual hair to people in Second Life. And there's a hair fair every year at which the new hair is exhibited. And in the last time this ran, it's happening starting off this Friday, and the last one that raised $11,843 US for Wig for Kids, which provides wigs for children who've lost their hair because of cancer therapy. But I'm just giving that as an example. So if you're interested in charity volunteering, it's a way of doing that. It's actually quite a lot of things which are not to do with education or specifically, intrinsically with virtual worlds at all that people are doing there. And some tips just before I give a short demo at the end. If you want to try virtual worlds, is also to reflect on how you want to use them. In fact, I use Second Life both personally and professionally. I love the visual stimulation. I just think it's fun, relaxing, whimsical. And so I spend some money. It's one of the hobbies I spend money on. But you don't have to do that, but sometimes some people just do that. They just find it's fun or relaxing. Some people are engaged professionally, and you might see that you want to upskill a particular skill, that you see it as being something that can help develop you as a professional. And also, if you're interested in lifelong learning, it might appeal to you then. But I think it's worth reflecting, and that any of these uses are fine if that gives you something back. I think it's really a good idea to find a friend to help you. So I can be a friend if you want to try it out again, or to go enter somewhere like Virtual Ability, which is an island in Second Life, which is run by the organization Virtual Ability, which is run by and for people with disabilities. The person who started up has MS, and so in the physical world, she's in a wheelchair. In Second Life, she doesn't have to present herself in a wheelchair. She definitely experiences that as a freedom. And they run conferences, they have discussions and exhibitions, and support each other in raising awareness about disability and its relation to the digital world as well. And attending events, and I've linked to some calendars. I'll add a few more into the Google Doc to just find out what's going on, see what's being discussed, and then hopefully get to know people and explore. So I'm now going to stop sharing for a moment and go into Second Life. So do chip in, anyone in a couple of minutes while I'm doing that. And I'll just, as I said, give a kind of whistle-stop tour of a few places in Second Life, which are also indicated in the Google Doc. But Second Life is something where you do have to have a specialized browser. It's completely free to download. It's free to sign up for an avatar, but you can't. If you click the link, what you get is a map, which then tries to boot up a Second Life compliant browser. So just while I'm doing that, I'm blowing my nose. Sorry, I should have turned off the the camera while I was blowing my nose. Dina, I don't know if you want to chip in.
Yes, of course. As you were looking for this, Sheila, I was intrigued by what you mentioned, this kind of idea of a thin borderline between the virtual and the physical, the real world. And you demonstrated this very clearly with the example of the hair fair, cancer therapy, charity volunteering. And I think that's really something to consider when we're thinking about our own engagement and the time we invest in this kind of virtual worlds. But I was also intrigued by this dimension, the persistent environments through collaboration. And I thought indeed you do create these kinds of relationships and ongoing meetings, and you get a sense that this is really part of your real world, as you said at the beginning. So a lot of the times, especially for us, we were brought up and born before obviously the internet world, and sometimes we separate the real from the virtual environment, and in fact this is a real life, isn't it, in many ways. So I can definitely relate to that. I don't know what the audience feels, and are you having similar thoughts about, and what has intrigued you mostly in terms of this presentation? I think for me, it's very much all this, how do we engage people to go on that, and how do we help them to develop the skills to access these tools and resources?
Shall I share my screen again now?
Yeah. So try to share the screen, Sheila, and then we maybe have 5 minutes to just think and discuss about these issues. I think it's fascinating what you're going to show us now. So
here I am in Second Life. This is the pavilion of the Virtual Worlds Education Consortium, which has not been. If you click on those, you can get some information about education in virtual worlds, and it's a meeting place, but also we created these portals through to some of the educational places, like Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable. But I'm actually, and you can see what I've created, and I'll just explain. This is a note card. So in advance, I've created some landmarks for the places I'm going to go. This is what I can do to twiddle around my camera. And I'll try not to explain too much, but I'll just go to the Community Virtual Library. It pops up with a map. And if I click teleport, I'll go to the Community Virtual Library. Also, I've been given a note card, another note card, which gives me some information about the Community Virtual Library, which I would find in my inventory. One thing I'll mention is that you can have a lot of control about what you see. And I've got my camera set, so I'm not seeing very far away, because that's actually easier on my computer. And it means that things close to me will come into focus more quickly. Unlike a computer game where the designers try and use the minimum number of graphics, in Second Life, there's millions and millions of different graphics because people can create things. And so it takes, each of those has to be loaded by the computer, which is why it's quite heavy on the processing video cards. So actually there is a librarian here at the moment, and I'll just so this is an actual person I'm talking to. Now I think you're not getting the sounds from Second Life. So she's saying many pardons. People tend to be very polite in virtual worlds.
So Sheila, so somebody should really look after the library here? Is this like a normal job?
Yes. So it's not a paid occupation, and some of the people are trained librarians, and some of them are just people who wanted to volunteer for the library.
Okay, that's what I thought. I remember a little bit from my past life, in Second Life, in a way, when I tried it out, and I remember there were events as well. You could teleport and you could fly to them. And so that's, you get a little bit of information about her. And she's just said, welcome to the best library in Second Life. And I just wanted to highlight, so here the librarians have, for example, created areas to sit. If you click on these, I won't go to them, but it has links to the Gutenberg project. These are fairy books. They've got a special feature on Dickens. There's a Dickens installation every Christmas, based around A Christmas Carol. And similarly in here, there's lots of books. If you click on them, you get the copies online.
There's news. And so the reference librarian there, Tamu, would be able to answer a reference query. And it says here who's on duty, but it's her. I won't go through all of those. I was just going to go to one other place. So this whole area has things which have been created by the librarians. And this structure here is the music library. And I wanted to show you just one of the features. I realized that, which is the front? I've already forgotten which is the front. As you can see in Second Life, you can fly, which I still find quite fun. And I'm trying to find the, how do I get into this? Ah, it's from that side, I think. This is embarrassing. I rehearsed all of this beforehand.
It reminds me of myself when I met with one of my learners.
So I wanted to go, so Marley is actually the person I was talking about earlier. And in this, I'm going to teleport up to the next floor because spiral staircases are a bit challenging. And a nice feature here, just to illustrate again some interactivity, is that that will come into focus in a moment. You can experience the music, different kinds at the moment, just from these four. When you click on it, you choose a tune that you want to listen to, and then you're suddenly inside this pod. And in the virtual world, I'm meditating in a colorful pod and listening to the music.
So it looks a little bit psychedelic.
Yes. I think it's kind of 60s, perhaps indicated. I'm just thinking, actually, I think I'll go next to Genome Island. So just as a contrast, this is created by a science professor, biology professor. And it's an island created to teach people about genetics. There's information here about the different places you can go, the different, in the PowerPoint, I've given a screenshot of when we were touring the DNA exhibit. And I thought as an example of this, I would go to the cattery, which illustrates kind of genetics through being able to click on cats. So this is teaching students about inherited of X-linked genes. So I can click on the dad, which says, meow, click on mom, she has the babies. Then when you click on mom, it gives a little meowing sound, and then kittens appear, and it's telling you that if you've got a ginger father and this black and white mother, you get a torty female, a black male, a torty female, black male. But if here you've got a torty mum and an orange dad, you're getting 2 ginger, 1 torty, and a black and white. So it's teaching people about which is the dominant gene. So in all of these, you can you can make appear the mother and father, which have different combinations of coat color, and you can find out what's their kittens are likely to be. And there's also I think there's a PowerPoint presentation that appears that you can work through that tells you, and a note card about information about the genes. It tells you what to do to watch the slideshow and so forth. In fact, the instruction is to click all the way through, otherwise it stops working. So I better go through the second picture cat. And as I said, I would go to virtual ability. I would just show you virtual ability. I'll just teleport there. I'm aware that it's now 4 o'clock, so I probably shouldn't go to all the places I prepared. But I put the landmarks in the Google Doc. So as it says here, Virtual Ability was developed through a partnership between the Alliance Library System and Virtual Ability Inc. and initially got a grant from the National Library of Medicine to develop an island with an orientation and training centre for people with disabilities and chronic illnesses. And it's accessibly friendly for new and experienced. I would also say there's, because virtual worlds like this are least accessible to people with visual impairments, but there is a group of people supporting the blind community and who work on a browser that uses the information that you can get by clicking on something in order to, so I think probably if I click, see. So this tells me that this is a square freestanding start sign, and if I click on something else like a chair or something, it'll tell me it's a chair. So there's a lot of things you can actually do to make it more accessible to people with visual disabilities, as well as I already mentioned people with hearing disabilities, using text chat and not just voice, which is something people are much more aware of in this virtual world than they are elsewhere. And one of the things that you have here is the orientation center. So if people are starting afresh in Second Life, this is quite a good place to start. There's a whole pathway where it kind of starts with the basics, how you move around in Second Life. That was linking me to something to do with X genes, which I didn't follow. And also giving me a free t-shirt.
That's fantastic. There are so many things to explore. I understand. I wish we had another half an hour to really have the chance to.
Yeah, yes, I'll stop sharing. But that was just giving you a glimpse of some of the different ways in which, and you can see you can create those different kind of interactive environments. And some of them are also very, very beautiful that you just want to wander around. For example, there's some Japanese islands that I really love, which are full of cherry blossom and water and bridges and so forth, which are very soothing. And certainly sometimes if I'm very stressed from work, I can just pop into Second Life. And there are also, you can do meditation and Tai Chi. And it's been shown through research that has been researched into people whose avatars are meditating or doing Tai Chi. And it's been shown that the real person, the physical person's kind of breathing becomes more relaxed and so forth. It does actually have a calming, invigorating effect on the physical human being.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Sheila. I'm aware of the time, and I'm sure that there will be lots of questions, but you've given us your contact details on Twitter, and I'm sure that you're happy to be contacted that way.
Yes.
There's lots and lots of interesting ideas. Thank you so much for coming to our group to give us this presentation today. Thank you for sharing the slideshare presentation, the references, the Google document where people can find more information around other interesting projects. And thank you to our audience and who has been here and gave their precious time to attend the presentation. There was another one of our webinars. I hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you around again. We're gonna take a little break over the summer, but we'll come back with new and exciting events, hopefully from autumn. So,
well, thank you very much, and I'm sorry I talked for such a long time. I get over enthusiastic.
Not at all. Thanks everybody. Have a nice afternoon or evening or maybe morning, wherever you are. And we'll see you again soon. We'll stop the recording now, but we will remain until everybody has left. If you have any final questions, just type them in here. So that's the end of the recording. Thank you.